We look at the ocean, and we see ourselves. We watch the rhythmic, hypnotic breath of the tide, and we mistake its vastness for serenity. For millennia, we have written of the sea as a blue sanctuary, a romantic wilderness that promises absolute freedom. We look at the horizon, painted in the soft golds of a quiet sunset, and we believe that because the surface resembles a mirror, what lies beneath must be a reflection of peace. It is the most enduring delusion on Earth. The surface is a grand deception. Beneath its silver mirror, the Pacific does not beg for peace. It demands blood. The tranquil blue sheet that shimmers under the sun is merely a mask, pulled over a meat grinder of cosmic proportions. There are no courts of law in the open sea. There are no treaties signed in the dark, no rights granted to the weak, and no codes of mercy observed by the strong. It is a liquid colosseum where every living thing is simultaneously an assassin and a target. To step across the threshold of the shore is to enter a world stripped of luxury, where the only currency that matters is kinetic energy, and the only law is the uncompromising mandate of the eternal throat. To understand the raw brutality of this machine, one must look off the coast of Japan, where two titanic marine currents smash into one another in a permanent, silent collision. From the sweltering equator, the Kuroshio current surges northward, a blistering dark blue highway of tropical water moving with immense velocity. But the north is waiting. Sprinting down from the subarctic wastes, the Oyashio current sweeps southward, a freezing, heavy emerald green juggernaut, thick with nutrients scraped from the polar ice. When these two titans collide, the oceanographic explosion ignites the entire food chain. Freezing minerals are forced to the sunlit surface, triggering a biological powder keg. The engine ignites. Microscopic algae bloom across thousands of miles within hours. Behind them come billions of krill. And behind the krill come the mid-tier consumers in numbers that defy human comprehension. Millions of silver-scaled herring pack themselves into formations so dense they cast shadows across the sea floor, turning the water into a shimmering wall of solid silver. Mackerel and squid join the frenzy, converting the energy of the currents into a boiling soup of flashing scales and desperate survival. This is the richest, most cutthroat arena on the face of the planet. It is an ecosystem built entirely on overabundance and extreme violence. And as the silver schools pack themselves into frantic spheres of flesh, they draw the attention of the true masters of the blue. Immense shadows are altering their course. They are tracking the vibration of a million beating fins. They are reading the chemical signature of blood carried along the current lines. The true arbiters of life and death are rising from the depths, drawn to the intersection of the currents like gladiators entering a packed colosseum. They do not come to participate in the frenzy, they come to govern it. We stand safely upon the shore, entirely blind to the titanic struggles unfolding just 50 feet below our boots. The ocean does not belong to the casual observer. It belongs to the creatures that have spent millions of years perfecting the art of the kill. As the sun sets over the northwest Pacific, casting bloody streaks of crimson across the rolling swells, the great hunters are taking their positions in the dark. The illusion of the mirror is about to be shattered. The arena is open. No crown in this boiling arena is permanent, for the Blue Colosseum does not recognize a singular dynasty. Instead, the weight of total dominion is fractured, split cleanly among three distinct empires that have carved the ocean into three separate realities. They do not merely occupy different layers of the sea, they represent three entirely separate answers to the agonizing riddle of extinction. They are three distinct expressions of raw evolutionary will, each having spent millions of years refining a specific philosophy of slaughter. To look upon them is to look at the three absolute paths a living creature can take when tasked with conquering an environment that is actively trying to destroy it. The first will is born of pure, unadulterated anatomy, the philosophy of the perfect singular tool. This is the path of the great white shark. It is an evolutionary design that refused to compromise. A biological blueprint so flawless that nature sculpted it 400 million years ago and then simply broke the mold. The shark does not rely on a community. It does not seek the comfort of a clan, nor does it possess the luxury of a complex emotional intellect. It is a solitary god of the sunlit shallows and middle depths, a localized engine of pure flesh and razor geometry. Its entire existence is stripped of non-essentials, narrowed down to a terrifyingly efficient sequence of sensory inputs and kinetic outputs. It reads the electricity of fear through its snout, warms its own blood to defy the Arctic chill, and strikes with the vertical weight of a living missile. The Great White is the ultimate testament to what a single individual can achieve when it transforms its entire body into an uncompromising weapon. The second will does not seek the light of the shallows. It is a philosophy forged in the crushing, suffocating nightmare of the absolute void. This is the path of the sperm whale. Where other species see a barrier of fatal pressure and pitch-black emptiness, this prehistoric mammal saw an empire. It is the desolate conqueror of the midnight zone, a 45-ton titan that voluntarily abandons the oxygen of the sky to dive miles into the fracturing dark of the trenches. Its survival is not a matter of speed or sharp teeth. It is a triumph of sheer endurance against a hostile universe. It collapses its own lungs to survive the weight of the water, turns its muscle tissue black with stored oxygen, and uses the loudest acoustic weapon on the planet to blast through the dark and see with sound. The sperm whale walks the path of the lonely giant, fighting an eternal, invisible war against the monsters of the abyss, proving that survival sometimes belongs to the creature willing to endure the most hostile purgatory the planet can offer. But there is a third will, a philosophy that looks at the solitary weapon of the shark and the immense endurance of the whale and declares them both obsolete. This is the path of the orca. It is the empire of the collective mind. The orca looked at the lawless violence of the ocean and realized a fundamental truth. A predator hunting alone is merely a beast, but a predator hunting as a family is a nation. It does not rely on the armor of cartilage or the solitude of the deep trenches. Its weapon is an overlapping network of shared intelligence, language, and culture. The orca thinks, moves, and strikes as a single, multi-headed organism. It possesses a brain wired for deep emotional synchronization, allowing a pod to execute complex military strategies that can trick a seal, trap a million fish, or systematically dismantle a great white shark. It is the apex of apex predators, an intelligence so vast that it has no natural enemies, rewriting the laws of the ocean by proving that individual power must always bow to the supremacy of the group. Three titans, three completely different answers to the same brutal question. If you place them on the scales of the sea, who truly owns the future of the blue arena? Is it the shark, with its 400 million years of perfected anatomical weaponry? Is it the whale, with its titanic ability to conquer the deep, crushing unknown? Or is it the orca, whose collective mind turns the act of survival into a high-stakes art of war? The currents off Japan continue to churn, carrying the blood of the lower tiers up toward the sun, waiting for the verdict. The three wills are moving into position, their paths destined to cross in the dark waters of the convergence. The boundaries of their kingdoms are about to blur, and only one philosophy will emerge as the true arbiter of life and death. Time is the ultimate predator, an invisible current that erodes mountains, shifts continents, and sweeps entire empires of living flesh into the quiet dust of fossil beds. To survive a single century is a triumph of adaptation. To survive 1,000,000 years is a miracle. But there is a shadow in the water that does not count time in millions of years. It counts time in epochs. It was swimming in the dark primordial soup of this planet 400 million years ago, long before the first primitive amphibians crawled out of the mud, long before the vast, suffocating fern forests of the Carboniferous era grew, and long before the very concept of a flower had been written into the biological blueprint of Earth. Before trees grew on land, the shark was already elite. Let that truth settle into the bedrock of your mind. When the first true trees finally broke through the soil of a young Earth, their roots pushed down into a planet whose oceans were already governed by the unblinking black eyes of the shark. Empires of bone and blood have risen and fallen on the dry land like smoke. The dinosaurs, creatures of unimaginable scale and terrifying majesty, shook the continents with their footsteps for 160 million years, only to be wiped clean from the surface of the globe by a single rock falling from the sky. The mammal lineages mutated, grew, and diversified into an endless array of bizarre predators, most of which starved, died, and became footnotes in stone. Through it all, as the surface of the Earth burned, froze, cracked, and reformed, the shark simply kept swimming. It did not change because it did not need to. It was an evolutionary master stroke on the first attempt, a design so fundamentally correct that nature found nothing to correct. When we look at the modern great white shark, we are not looking at a modern animal. We are looking at an ancient relic that looked at 5 separate mass extinctions, cataclysms that wiped out 95% of all life on Earth and refused to die. Its longevity is not an accident of luck. It is a direct result of a profound, counterintuitive evolutionary decision made in the deep past, the total abandonment of bone. Nearly every major apex predator that has ever attempted to rule the planet has built its empire on a foundation of heavy, rigid calcium bone. Bone offers strength. It offers a hard anchor for massive muscles and a protective cage for delicate organs. But bone carries a heavy price tag. It is brittle, it is immensely heavy, and it requires a massive, continuous investment of metabolic energy to grow, maintain, and repair. If a bone fractures in the unforgiving arena of the wild, the predator is broken. Its mobility is compromised, its speed drops, and starvation immediately moves in for the kill. The shark looked at the trap of bone and chose a different path. It built its entire architecture out of cartilage. Cartilage is the soft, flexible tissue that forms the human ear and the tip of the human nose. On paper, it sounds like an absurdly fragile material with which to build a 2-ton, 20-foot killing machine. Yet, in the fluid mechanics of the ocean, cartilage is a superpower. It is structural genius disguised as softness. A skeleton made entirely of cartilage is nearly twice as light as a skeleton made of bone, giving the great white a natural, effortless buoyancy that allows it to glide through the water column with a fraction of the energy required by a bony fish. It does not possess a swim bladder. It does not need to waste energy pumping gases to maintain its position in the water. It is a living glider, weightless in the heavy blue, moving through the sea like a ghost that defies gravity. Furthermore, cartilage does not break under pressure. It flexes. When a great white strikes a 200-pound fur seal at 25 miles per hour, the kinetic impact is devastating. A bony predator would risk shattering its own jaws, fracturing its own skull, or snapping its own spine under the violent recoil of its own power. The shark's cartilaginous frame acts as a massive, organic shock absorber. It bends, absorbs the kinetic explosion, ripples through the impact, and snaps back into its perfect hydrodynamic shape instantly. Its flexibility gives it a turning radius that leaves bony fish helpless, allowing its massive, muscular torso to twist and contort with an agile elasticity that seems impossible for a creature of its weight. It is a lightweight, indestructible chassis designed for continuous, high-speed warfare. This structural elasticity becomes even more terrifying when you look at the history of its giant cousin, the legendary megalodon. For millions of years, the megalodon ruled the warmer oceans as a 60-foot mountain of muscle and calcified terror. It was a shark that tried to play the game of extreme scale, pushing the limits of cartilage by reinforcing its joints with heavy layers of calcium, growing so massive that it required an unsustainable volume of large whales just to fuel its daily metabolic engine. When the climate shifted, the oceans cooled, and the great whales migrated to the freezing poles. The heavy, oversized megalodon could not follow. Its scale became its coffin. It starved to extinction, leaving behind nothing but thousands of massive teeth littering the dark floor of the abyss. The lineage of the great white watched the giant fall. It survived by remaining lean, agile, and medium-scaled. It did not try to conquer through sheer, clumsy size. It conquered through the absolute refinement of its velocity and its senses. It stayed in the middle depths, adapting its warm-blooded metabolism to hunt in the cold currents where the megalodon could never survive. It allowed the world around it to change, watching the continents drift apart and the ancient oceans dry up into modern maps, remaining completely unbothered by the passage of time. It is a creature that has reached a state of evolutionary stasis, a living fossil that proves perfection does not need to innovate. As the shadow of the great white glides through the Kuroshio-Oyashio convergence off Japan, it moves with the chilling arrogance of an entity that has outlived everything that ever tried to challenge it. It does not know that humans exist. It does not care about our history, our science, or our empires. It knows only the rhythm of the current, the chemical signature of blood, and the ancient mechanical drive to strike from the dark. The shark is not a modern occupant of the sea. It is the original owner. Every other predator in these waters is a newcomer, an amateur testing its luck in an arena that has been managed by the unblinking eye of the cartilaginous god since the dawn of time. But as the ancient shadow moves into the light of the shallows, the sensors on its snout begin to twitch. The prehistoric relic is about to wake up to a world that is no longer defined by ancient stone and silent currents. The machine is arming itself. To be hunted by the great white shark is to be pursued by a phantom that can read the invisible reality of your own body. In the sunlit shallows and middle depths off Hokkaido, the ocean looks clear to the human eye. But to the creatures swimming within its freezing currents, it is a dense, overwhelming matrix of hidden signals. A sea lion resting on the surface does not know that its body is a broadcasting station. It believes it is safe, hidden by the murky green mask of the Oyashio current. It slows its breathing, stays close to the kelp, and remains perfectly still. It makes no sound. It creates no wake, but it cannot stop its heart from beating. And in the open ocean, that is a fatal confession. Every time a living heart contracts, every time a muscle twitches, and every time a nervous system fires a microscopic command through a strand of tissue, it generates a faint, localized electrical field. It is a biological whisper, an imperceptible pulse of nanovolts that bleeds out into the salt water, To a human, to a whale, or to any land-dwelling creature, this electricity is completely invisible. But to the snout of the great white shark, the ocean is a blazing neon grid of electrical currents. The shark does not merely look at the world, it reads its voltage. Sprinkled across the skin of its snout, concentrated around its jaws and eyes, are hundreds of tiny, dark pores that look like nothing more than random freckles. These are the ampullae of Lorenzini. Each pore is the opening of a long, delicate tube lined with a highly conductive, clear glycoprotein gel, terminating in a microscopic capsule of sensory cells. This gel is an evolutionary masterpiece, a fluid wire that catches the faintest electrical ripples in the sea and channels them directly to the shark's massive olfactory bulbs and sensory brain. The sensitivity of this system defies human engineering. The great white can detect an electrical field as faint as 5 billionths of a volt per centimeter. If you were to connect a standard AA battery to 2 electrodes placed 1,000 miles apart in the open ocean, the shark could read the drop in voltage. It can feel the heartbeat of a buried flatfish beneath 3 feet of sand. It can feel the chemical panic of a sea lion whose blood is beginning to pump with the realization of danger. Long before the shark can see you with its jet-black eyes, long before it can smell the first microscopic molecule of your blood, it has already felt the rhythm of your fear vibrating through its nose. You cannot hide from a hunter that can taste the electricity of your soul. Yet, an advanced sensory blueprint is useless if the physical machine cannot move fast enough to exploit it. This is the tragic flaw of nearly all large fish in the subarctic waters of Japan. They are prisoners of the temperature around them. When the freezing, heavy currents of the north sweep down through Hokkaido, the water temperature plunges toward 40 degrees Fahrenheit. For a cold-blooded animal, this drop is a death sentence for performance. In the freezing dark, a standard fish's body temperature matches the sea. Its blood slows to a sluggish crawl. Its muscles stiffen, losing their elasticity. Its reflexes become dull, and its brain struggles to process information. In the deep cold, the typical predatory fish becomes a slow, clumsy engine running on a dying battery. But the great white is not a typical fish. It carries an internal furnace. Deep within the dark red muscle blocks along the shark's spine lies the rete mirabile, the wonderful net. It is a tight, dense web of microscopic parallel veins and arteries that acts as a countercurrent heat exchange system. As the shark swims, its massive lateral muscles generate tremendous metabolic heat. In a normal fish, this heat would be carried by the blood to the gills and lost instantly to the freezing ocean. The great white's internal furnace intercepts that loss. The cold, oxygen-rich blood coming from the gills is forced to run directly alongside the warm, waste-rich blood coming from the core muscles. The heat leaps across the microscopic vessel walls, warming the incoming blood before it ever reaches the extremities. The shark recycling its own energy. Because of this anatomical miracle, the core of the great white shark can remain up to 20 degrees warmer than the freezing waters surrounding it. While the mackerel and sea lions around it are slowing down, their bodies tightening under the grip of the Arctic chill, the shark is operating at peak thermal efficiency. Its stomach digests food at double the speed. Its optic nerves fire with crystalline clarity. Its massive red muscles remain hot, supple, and coiled like high-tension steel springs, ready to release a catastrophic burst of kinetic energy at a moment's notice. It is an internally heated locomotive operating in a frozen wasteland. This combination of electric sight and internal warmth transforms the great white from a simple marine animal into a calculated psychological force. Its sensory blueprint does not just guide its teeth, it feeds a relentless, solitary predatory drive that has remained unbroken for eons. The shark does not hunt out of anger. It does not possess the complex emotional apparatus for malice or cruelty. Its mind is an ancient clinical operating system that views the entire ocean through a single binary lens: energy available or energy consumed. When its snout locks on to the electric rhythm of a target, there is no hesitation, no doubt, and no internal debate. The blueprint arms the weapon. The hot blood in its veins demands action. And the 400-million-year-old software takes complete control of the machine. It aligns its cartilage frame with the vertical axis of the signal. It tilts its pectoral fins, sinks into the absolute blackness of the lower water column, and begins to draw its internal blade across the silk of the sea. The target above continues to breathe, completely unaware that its own heartbeat has just signed its death warrant. The trap is set. The hunt does not begin with a fin cutting the surface. It begins in the ink, where the light goes to die. 100 feet below the rolling swells of the Kuroshio-Oyashio convergence, a 2-ton female great white shark floats in absolute stillness. To an outside observer, she would appear dead, a massive slate-gray monolith suspended in the cold, dim liquid of the twilight zone. But she is hyper-alive. Her massive pectoral fins are angled slightly downward, acting as stationary wings to catch the subtle deep-sea currents. Her gills rip oxygen from the freezing water with slow, rhythmic movements. Her unblinking, pitch-black eyes are locked in a permanent vertical stare, looking straight up toward the sunlit ceiling of her kingdom. Above her, floating in the shimmering silver light of the surface, is a northern fur seal. To the shark, looking up from the darkness, the seal is not a creature of fur and bone. It is a crisp black silhouette. It is a stark, moving shadow cut out against the brilliant, blinding glare of the sunlit sky. The seal is swimming lazily through the kelp fringe, completely unaware of the abyss below. It has no defense against what is coming, because the shark has positioned herself perfectly within the seal's ultimate vulnerability, the blind spot of the vertical axis. The seal can look left, it can look right, it can scan the horizon for fins, but its evolutionary biology never taught it to fear the absolute vertical void beneath its belly. The shark reads the silhouette. She calculates the distance, the drift of the current, and the precise angle of interception. The internal furnace of Arete Mirabile has warmed her massive lateral muscles to a boiling pitch, turning her core into a high-pressure engine packed with potential kinetic energy. The ancient predatory software running through her brain detects the erratic electrical signature of the seal's paddling flippers. The binary switch is flipped. The preparation is over. The weapon is launched. She drops her tail. She flexes her massive caudal fin. The first stroke of her tail is slow, heavy, and immensely powerful, displacing hundreds of gallons of water and tilting her 2-ton frame into a perfectly vertical 90-degree ascent. She begins to climb. Her pectoral fins tuck tight against her flanks, transforming her body into a frictionless, hydrodynamic torpedo. A second tail stroke. The water ripples across her dermal denticles. She accelerates, 10 miles per hour. The sunlit surface grows closer, but the silhouette of the seal remains completely still, oblivious to the mountain of muscle rocketing up from the dark. 15 miles per hour. The red muscle blocks along her spine burn hot, recycling their own heat, pumping oxygen-rich blood into her heart at double the speed. 20 miles per hour. The sheer velocity of her ascent creates a low, roaring hum through the water column. 25 miles per hour. Her maximum burst speed, 2 tons of calcified cartilage. White belly and tearing teeth are now a living missile launched on an irreversible trajectory of absolute destruction. The distance closes in seconds. 50 feet, 30 feet, 10 feet. The jaw unhinges, shooting forward and outward like a hydraulic trap, exposing rows of triangular 2-inch scalpels. The seal finally detects the displacement of water. It turns its head. Its eyes widen in the final millisecond of its life as the ocean floor rises to meet it. The impact is apocalyptic. The ocean shatters. 2 tons of kinetic fury detonate through the surface of the sea, launching the great white completely out of the water in a catastrophic explosion of white foam, blood, and displaced ocean. The shark hangs in the midair for a fraction of a second, a terrifying monolith of gray and white outlined against the morning sky, her jaws clamped shut around the fractured torso of the seal. Gravity asserts its heavy claim. She crashes back down into the water with a thunderous roar, sending a wall of spray 20 feet into the air before the rolling green swells of the Pacific close over the vortex of the strike. Then, the silence returns. The frantic, foaming chaos vanishes as quickly as it arrived. The ocean column stills. The white bubbles dissipate into the green mask of the Oyashio current. The crimson cloud of the kill begins to drift, thinning out into long, delicate ribbons of red that dissolve into the heavy salt of the sea. There is no struggle. There is no prolonged chase. The sheer, crushing momentum of the vertical strike severed the seal's spine instantly, ending the narrative of the hunted before it ever had a chance to react. 50 feet below the surface, the shark glides through the red mist she has created. Her jaw shifts, resetting itself into its regular alignment with a dull, cartilaginous click. She swallows the energy she has just harvested, her ancient, clinical mind completely unmoved by the violence of the event. She does not celebrate the victory. She does not feel pride. The execution was merely the logical conclusion of a 400-million-year-old math problem, a perfect alignment of light, speed, and anatomy. Slowly, her massive tail begins to flex once more with a lazy, rhythmic stride. She tilts her pectoral fins, turns her back to the light of the sun, and begins her long, silent descent back into the comforting ink of the twilight zone. The vertical corridor is clear. The trap is reset. The king goes back to the dark. To rule as a god is to be utterly, permanently alone. As the great white shark glides back into the empty expanse of the Northwest Pacific, she enters a kingdom that possesses no borders, no capital, and no companions. For 70 years, this 2-ton female has charted her course through the trackless blue, crossing thousands of miles of open ocean from the tropical reefs of Okinawa to the subarctic currents of Hokkaido. Yet, in all that time, she has never once built a home. She has never guarded a territory. She has never recognized a friend, and she has never known the safety of a pack. She is the absolute master of her environment, but she is also a prisoner of her own uncompromising independence. In the blue colosseum, independence is a beautiful, terrifying weight. The shark does not possess the neurological hardware for affection, grief, or loneliness. Her mind is a silent, clinical fortress, completely isolated from the social warmth that defines the mammals swimming above her. When she crosses paths with another of her kind in the deep, there is no greeting, no acknowledgement, and no cooperation. There is only a tense, silent calculation of size and intent. They circle each other like armored warships in the night, measuring the length of each other's shadows before churning away into the emptiness. To get too close is to invite a territorial strike. To trust is to die. She has no allies. She expects no mercy. She moves through the vast, watery desert as a singular, drifting planet in a galaxy of cold salt. This absolute solitude is an extraordinary evolutionary shield, but it is also a fragile curse. When you build your entire empire on the perfection of a single body, you place the survival of your entire lineage on a knife's edge. A solitary god has no safety net. Consider the vulnerability of a machine that relies entirely on mechanical perfection. During the violent chaos of a vertical strike, a 2-ton shark crashing into a desperate, thrashing sea lion risks everything. If a single triangular tooth fractures incorrectly, if the hydraulic framework of her cartilage jaw is strained, or if a desperate prey manages to claw deeply into her exposed gill slits, the clock begins to tick backward. For a mammal, an injury can be buffered by the protection of the group. Clans share food, mothers defend the wounded, and packs stand guard. For the great white, a serious wound is a slow, solitary death sentence. An infected gill slit slows her velocity. A dropped knot of speed means she can no longer catch the agile fur seals. A missed meal weakens her muscle furnace, lowering her internal temperature and dulling the electric receptors on her snout. The descent is quiet, step by step, and completely unnoticed by the ocean around her. The killing machine cannot ask for help. She cannot retreat to a den to heal. She must keep swimming 24 hours a day, every day of her life, just to force water through her gills and to keep from suffocating. She is a locomotive that cannot stop running, even as her engine slowly falls apart in the dark. This vulnerability becomes terrifyingly acute in a world that is no longer behaving according to the rules of her 400-million-year-old memory. The ocean is changing. Industrial noise is cluttering her sensory matrix. Shifting currents are driving her traditional prey into unfamiliar waters, and toxic chemicals are silently accumulating inside her long-lived tissues. A solitary hunter cannot adapt by passing down new knowledge to her offspring. She cannot hold a council to alter her tactics. She can only rely on the hard-coded instincts of her ancient DNA. When the environment shifts faster than the slow wheel of genetics can turn, the lone wolf of the sea finds herself stranded in a future she was never designed to understand. She glides to the Kuroshio-Oyashio convergence, an ancient relic of a simpler, more brutal era, completely unaware that her absolute sovereignty is beginning to crack. Her unblinking black eyes stare out into the endless empty blue horizon, searching for the next electric whisper of life, completely indifferent to her own profound isolation. She does not know she is alone. She does not care. She is simply the flesh and blood manifestation of a primordial law that demands she move forward until her heart beats its final, solitary rhythm. The shadow grows smaller. The slate-gray outline of her dorsal fin melts into the heavy, suffocating ink of the twilight zone, disappearing into a vast, liquid desert that offers no comfort and leaves no scars. The king is gone, dissolving back into the cold anonymity of the abyss, leaving the middle depths behind. But as her solitary presence fades into the deep, the narrative of the ocean drops even further down, plunging past her territory into a realm of absolute darkness, where the rules of light and anatomy are completely rewritten. The void is waiting. To leave the surface of the seas, to abandon the cradle of life, and enter a realm defined by the slow, crushing weight of physics. Floating at the surface of the Japan Trench, a 45-ton male sperm whale takes his final breath. For 2 hours, he has rested in the sunlit shallows, his massive, scarred black body rocking gently in the Pacific swells as he prepares for his journey. Through his single, left-sided blowhole, he exhales a series of explosive, wet plumes, purging his respiratory system and completely replacing the air in his massive body. His heart rate drops, his mind focuses, and with a slow, majestic arch of his spine, he lifts his massive, triangular fluke high against the gray sky. He cuts the surface, leaving the world of light behind, and points his titanic head straight down into the infinite vertical void. He is entering the territory of absolute gravity. The first 300 meters are familiar. This is the twilight zone, where the blue of the Pacific slowly loses its warmth, fading into a cold, dim slate gray. But the whale does not stop. He slides past 500 meters, then 800, crossing the threshold into the mesopelagic zone. Here, the ocean begins to tighten its grip. At this depth, the pressure of the water is no longer a gentle embrace. It is a physical force, pressing against every square inch of his skin with the weight of an industrial vice. For a human, or for any conventional submarine, this is the boundary of structural death. But for the titan of the abyss, this is merely the front gate. To conquer this kingdom, the whale must execute a series of radical, terrifying biological sacrifices. As he passes 1,000 meters, entering the absolute blackness of the bathypelagic zone, the weight of the ocean reaches a staggering 1,500 pounds per square inch. At this depth, air is a lethal liability. If the whale attempted to hold a lungful of gas, the immense pressure would implode his chest cavity, shattering his ribs like dry twigs and rupturing his internal organs. To survive, the whale chooses to deflate. Voluntarily, his massive, flexible rib cage begins to fold inward. His lungs collapse entirely, squeezing out the last residual pockets of air and rendering his respiratory system completely inert. He no longer carries oxygen in his chest. Instead, his entire body becomes a solid, non-compressible engine of flesh and oil. The oxygen required to keep his massive brain alive has been stripped from the air and driven deep into his blood and tissue, bound to a hyper-concentrated network of myoglobin proteins. This chemical adaptation is so dense that it stains his massive muscle blocks a deep, unnatural charcoal brown. A flesh so dark it appears almost black, saturated with the iron-rich currency of stored energy. He is a mammal that has systematically unmade his own anatomy, abandoning the foundational rules of air-breathing life to become a living stone sinking through a liquid vacuum. 1,500 meters, 2,000 meters. The descent is slow, heavy, and completely deliberate. The temperature of the water plunges past 40 degrees, nearing the absolute freezing point of the deep sea. The pressure is now equivalent to placing a heavy luxury vehicle on every square inch of his charcoal skin. The silence down here is not empty. It is a thick, heavy, suffocating presence that wraps around his 45-ton frame like a shroud of liquid lead. There are no currents here, no waves, and no seasons. Time itself seems to solidify under the weight of 2 miles of overhead water. Most creatures stop here. Most dare not look further into the fracture of the earth. But the Japan Trench does not care about boundaries. It keeps dropping, a jagged, tectonic wound cut deep into the crust of the planet, plunging into an eternity of absolute darkness, where light is not merely absent, it is a physical impossibility. The bottom of the world has arrived. At over 2,500 meters below the surface, the lone male sperm whale enters his hunting ground. He is completely blind in a conventional sense. The sun is a mythological concept belonging to a distant, superficial universe 2 miles above his head. If a human could stand at this depth, the crushing atmosphere would implode the skull instantly, turning bone to powder before the brain could even register the pain. Yet here, in the cold, black heart of the trenches, the Titan moves with an ancient, eerie grace. He is entirely alone, a warm-blooded monument of pure will operating in an alien purgatory that has never seen a ray of light since the oceans were first formed. His collapsed lungs are quiet. His slow, heavy heartbeat thuds against his compressed ribs like a distant drum. A solitary pulse of mammalian life fighting against the dead weight of the abyss. He has completed the descent. He has endured the gravity of the dark, and now the desolate conqueror must prepare to hunt. He tilts his massive, scarred head, aligns his long, narrow lower jaw with the black contours of the trench, and readies his true weapon. In the eternal night, the silent titan is about to speak. The abyss is listening. In the absolute blackness of the midnight zone, the eyes of the titan are nothing more than dead glass. To hunt at 2,500 meters below the surface is to realize that light is a luxury left behind at the gate of the shallows. Down here, in the cold, unyielding pressure of the Japan Trench, the visual universe does not exist. There are no colors to track, no shadows to calculate, and no silhouettes to betray the movement of life. Every creature is wrapped in a permanent, suffocating shroud of ink. If a predator relies on sight to survive this purgatory, it will starve in total anonymity. But the sperm whale did not conquer the abyss by looking. He conquered it by screaming. Inside the massive, block-shaped forehead of the 45-ton titan lies the spermaceti organ, a multi-ton reservoir of dense, waxy oil that accounts for nearly 1/3 of the whale's total body weight. For centuries, human whalers looked at this colossal structure and believed it was used for buoyancy, a simple ballast to help the giant sink and rise. They were entirely wrong. The spermaceti is not a weight. It is the barrel of the most powerful acoustic cannon ever produced by a living creature on planet Earth. The whale begins his hunt by forcing air through a pair of highly specialized nasal passages, known as the phonic lips, located deep near his blowhole. The air snaps shut. A spark of sound is born. This initial acoustic pulse is not allowed to escape into the water. Instead, it is directed backward, rocketed through the dense crystalline pool of the spermaceti oil. The waxy matrix acts as a massive acoustic lens, focusing the raw vibration, straightening the sound waves into a laser-sharp parallel beam. The sound hits the air-filled frontal sac at the very back of the skull, bounces off the bone like a mirror, and is hurled forward through a secondary acoustic structure called the junk, accelerating and amplifying with every microsecond. When the sound finally leaves the front of the whale's head, it shatters the silence of the deep. Click. It is a sharp, metallic, agonizingly loud report. It does not sound like an animal call. It sounds like an industrial pneumatic hammer striking a sheet of solid steel. Each click lasts only a fraction of a millisecond, but it registers at an unbelievable 236 decibels. To understand that number in the human world, know this. A jet engine at takeoff produces 140 decibels. The human eardrum ruptures at 150. At 200 decibels, the sheer kinetic shock wave of the sound can destroy human lung tissue instantly. The sperm whale is firing a localized acoustic shock wave that fractures the liquid density of the sea. This sonic cry is an evolutionary marvel that operates on two terrifying levels. On the first level, it is his eyes. The whale fires a continuous, rapid stream of these clicks into the black void, a sonic flashlight cutting through the eternal night. The acoustic beam travels through the dark at 5 times the speed of sound on land, strikes the soft, rubbery tissue of an organism swimming hundreds of meters away, and bounces back. The returning echo is caught by the whale's long, narrow lower jaw, which is packed with fat-filled channels that conduct the vibrations directly to his inner ear. His brain processes the data instantly, translating the echoes into a flawless, 3-dimensional, tactile map. He does not see the target. He feels its geometry. He knows its exact speed, its density, its trajectory, and its scale, long before he ever comes within striking distance. But on the second level, the click ceases to be a sensor. It becomes an executioner. When the whale narrows his acoustic beam and closes the distance to his target, the frequency of the clicks accelerates into a frantic, buzzing roar known as the terminal creak. The sound waves are packed so tightly together they become a physical wall of kinetic energy. As the 236 decibel shock wave hits the fragile, jelly-like nervous system of deep-sea prey, the immense acoustic pressure can paralyze, disorient, or completely stun the target in mid-water. The sound hits like a physical fist. In the lawless dark, the whale does not need to chase his prey through an erratic, exhausting pursuit. He simply locates the signal, focuses his multi-ton oil cannon, and shatters the creature's ability to resist with a blast of pure energy. The target goes limp, its nervous system short-circuited by the acoustic violence, floating helplessly in the ink as the massive, narrow lower jaw of the Titan swings open to claim the prize. The desolate conqueror glides through the wreckage of the silence he has made. He fires another click. Click. The echo returns, painting the next target in lines of vibration, keeping the machine armed and operational in a world of zero light. He is the master of the sonic horizon, a predator that turns his own voice into a weapon of absolute dominion. The cannon is loaded. The darkness is his crosshair. The Titan moves deeper into the kill zone. No human eye has ever witnessed the collision of the Titans, for the arena demands an absolute sacrifice of light. 2 miles beneath the rolling surface of the Pacific, the dark does not keep secrets. It keeps scars. When the sperm whale locks his sonic crosshairs onto a massive, rubbery signal in the depths of the Japan Trench, he is not closing in on a passive target. He is tracking a myth made of muscle and camouflage. Architeuthis, the giant squid. This is the phantom of the abyss, a creature with eyes the size of human heads designed to catch the faintest glimmer of deep-sea bioluminescence, and 10 crushing arms lined with razor-sharp, chitinous teeth. It is an ambush predator that has ruled the Dark Kingdom for millions of years, an ancient intelligence that does not recognize the authority of the mammal. The hunt is not a chase. It is a violent, chaotic wrestling match in a vacuum of complete, suffocating silence. The whale closes the distance, his narrow lower jaw swinging open like a white ivory gate, his 50 massive teeth ready to clamp down through the ink. But the ghost of the trench responds with an explosion of defensive fury. 10 massive tentacles lash out through the dark, wrapping violently around the whale's titanic head, gripping the waxy skin with hundreds of powerful, circular suckers. The squid does not try to flee. It fights for its existence, pulling its massive, rubbery mantle tight against the whale's jaw, using its sharp, parrot-like beak to tear desperately at the Titan's thick blubber. The dark column of the sea begins to churn, a frantic, swirling vortex of 45 tons of mammalian muscle locked in the suffocating embrace of a tentacled nightmare. The battle unfolds without a single sound escaping into the wider ocean. An epic, destructive dance occurring in a world that offers no witnesses and leaves no records. The squid twists, flexing its muscular arms, using the saw-toothed rings of its suckers to dig deep into the whale's face, tearing away ribbons of dark skin and leaving circular wounds that bleed black in the lightless void. The whale counter-surges, using his immense kinetic mass to ram the giant cephalopod against the steep, rocky walls of the trench, using the sheer weight of 2 miles of water to crush the squid's internal support structures. It is a primal, savage conflict between the lung and the gill, the warm blood and the cold ink, played out on the ragged edge of survival. The vacuum of the abyss holds them tight, a claustrophobic arena where every movement requires a massive expenditure of stored energy. The squid's tentacles squeeze tighter, trying to bind the whale's jaw, trying to block the blowhole that hasn't seen air in nearly an hour. But the internal engine of the sperm whale, fueled by the charcoal-brown blocks of hyperoxygenated myoglobin, refuses to fail. He drives forward. his massive teeth finally finding purchase through the rubbery mantle of the squid, snapping through the muscle fibers with a heavy, mammalian crunch. The grip of the phantom relaxes, its tentacles trailing through the dark like broken ropes, its ink dissolving into the absolute blackness of the trench. The war is over, and the silence of the midnight zone settles back over the trench like a heavy, cold dust. The giant squid is consumed, its energy absorbed into the massive metabolic furnace of the Titan, leaving nothing behind but the enduring, permanent record etched into the whale's own flesh. Every adult male sperm whale swimming through the Kuroshio-Oyashio convergence bears these markings. A jagged, chaotic tapestry of white. Circular scars that wrap around his snout, his eyes, and his flank like ancient battle medals. Some of these abalonic scars are as large as dinner plates, forensic proof of encounters with monsters that human science has barely begun to catalog. They are the signature of Architeuthis, written in the language of scar tissue, a permanent testament to a rivalry that has been unfolding in the dark since the dawn of mammalian history. The whale rises slowly from the trench, his skin burning from the shallow tears left by the squid's chitinous teeth. But his core remains steady. He does not carry pride for the victory. He does not understand the concept of a trophy. The scars on his face are simply the price of entry into the deep kingdom. The physical toll demanded by an arena that requires you to wrestle with phantoms just to stay alive. As he begins his long, slow ascent back toward the surface of the sea to reclaim the oxygen of the sky, his scarred visage cuts through the changing gradients of blue, a living monument to an eternal war that humanity can only imagine from the safety of the shore. The ghosts have been answered. The ledger is balanced. The conqueror goes back to the light to breathe. The dark is a choice made by the solitary, but the surface is a sanctuary held together by the collective. When the lone male sperm whale completes his long, exhausting ascent from the freezing depths of the Japan Trench, he breaks the surface into a world he will soon leave behind. He is an exile by design. Adult males are nomadic giants, destined to live out their lives in the cold, desolate polar currents, wandering the empty edges of the planet in absolute solitude. They are massive, moving fortresses of muscle and scar tissue, built for the singular brutality of the trenches. But 2,000 miles to the south, in the warm, crystal-clear waters off the coast of Okinawa, the narrative of the species shifts from a story of lonely violence into a beautiful masterclass of social synchronization. Down here, in the cradle of the tropical sun, lies the heart of the species, the matrix of mothers. Unlike the solitary bulls, the female sperm whales and their young never hunt or wander alone. They live in tightly knit, permanent matriarchal clans, an unbreakable sisterhood of grandmothers, mothers, daughters, and aunts who have bound their individual fates into a single shared existence. In these warm, sunlit shallows, the ocean ceases to feel like a lawless colosseum. It becomes a nursery, a floating village where the primary currency is not the weight of a jaw or the sharpness of a tooth, but trust, cooperation, and unconditional protection. To survive the open ocean as a child requires a defensive shield that no single mother can provide on her own. A newborn sperm whale calf is a fragile paradox. It weighs over 2,000 pounds at birth. Yet it is completely helpless in the vast blue arena. It cannot dive to the deep trenches to hunt for squid. Its soft, unformed jaw carries no teeth, and its lungs do not possess the capacity to survive the crushing gravity of the dark. It is a prisoner of the surface, anchored to the sunlit lair where it is entirely exposed to the sharp eyes of passing predators. If its mother had to hunt alone, she would face an agonizing choice: stay at the surface and starve, or dive to the depths to feed and leave her child behind as a defenseless target. The matriarchal clan solves this riddle through a sophisticated system of collective babysitting. When a mother needs to dive 2 miles down into the trench to refuel her massive metabolic furnace, she does not leave her calf alone. She swaps roles with the sisterhood. An aunt or a grandmother will swim to the surface, flanking the young calf with her massive protective body, acting as an organic shield against the dangers of the open sea. This cooperative nursery network ensures that a calf is never left unattended for a single second. While one half of the clan is down in the dark, wrestling with phantoms, the other half is holding the line at the surface, sharing the burden of protection with a flawless, selfless harmony. They do not share a territory. They share their children. This profound social matrix is held together by an invisible acoustic thread. As the family glides through the tropical blue, they do not fire the devastating industrial clicks of the hunting bulls. Instead, they communicate through a delicate, highly complex language of shared acoustic signals known as codas. These are short, rhythmic patterns of clicks that sound like an intricate Morse code drifting through the water column. Each clan possesses its own distinct dialect, an acoustic signature passed down from grandmother to daughter over hundreds of years. They use these codas to declare their identity, to coordinate the babysitting shifts, and to reassure the calves floating in the light. When the family gathers at the surface to rest, they pack their massive bodies tight against one another, rolling together in a tangled web of charcoal skin, clicking softly in a continuous, musical conversation that reinforces the emotional bond of the collective mind. In this tropical sanctuary, isolation is a forgotten myth. The strength of the individual is entirely secondary to the devotion of the family, creating a fortress of flesh that has kept the lineage alive for millions of years. But the warm peace of the Okinawan nursery is a fragile boundary in a changing ocean, and the absolute safety of the matriarchal clan is about to face a force it cannot out-cooperate. The narrative of the sea is rising once more to the surface, leaving behind the heavy, slow-moving titans of the deep trenches. The domain of the slow heartbeat and the acoustic flashlight is shifting, moving into the path of an entirely different kind of power. An empire built not on endurance, but on calculated, synchronized intelligence. The masters of strategy are arriving. The line is drawn. We have always measured the crown of intelligence by the standards of the dry land. For centuries, humanity has looked at the natural world through a mirror of profound arrogance, believing that true intellect must wear a primate's skin, walk upon 2 legs, and build towers of concrete and steel. We defined the mind by its capacity to manipulate tools, to conquer geography, and to bend the environment to its singular will. When we looked out at the vast rolling pastures of the open ocean, we saw only an unmapped wilderness populated by varying degrees of muscle, instinct, and teeth. We assumed that because the sea possessed no libraries, no borders, and no technology, it must be devoid of higher thought. It is a monumental error of perspective. Beneath the crashing waves of the Northwest Pacific swims a creature that does not need to build tools because its own biology is already an absolute weapon. And it does not need to write history because its entire culture is hardwired into the living matrix of its brain. This is the Orca. At 30 feet in length and weighing up to 10 tons, it is the undisputed giant of the dolphin family, a majestic silhouette of jet black and stark white cutting through the Kuroshio current. Yet, to measure the supremacy of the Orca by the weight of its frame or the velocity of its stride is to miss the entire genius of its design. Its true throne is not made of muscle. It is forged in the architecture of its mind. When you dissect the neuroanatomy of an orca, you enter an alien landscape of cognitive power that challenges every human assumption about the monopoly of intelligence. The orca brain weighs nearly 15 pounds, 4 times the size of a human brain, and it possesses an encephalization quotient that leaves nearly every other creature on the planet far behind. But the genius of this organ is not found in its raw weight. It is found in its staggering structural complexity. The cerebral cortex of the orca, the area responsible for higher-order thinking, memory, and awareness, features a degree of folding and surface area expansion that exceeds our own biological blueprint. Nature did not merely give them a larger brain. She packed it with a denser, more intricate computational network. The true evolutionary masterstroke, however, lies in a region known as the paralimbic system. In the human brain, the limbic system is the ancient, delicate core responsible for processing raw emotions, social attachments, and survival instincts. In the orca, this system has undergone a massive, unprecedented expansion, forming an entirely unique anatomical structure called the paralimbic lobe. This lobe directly connects the centers of high-level logical reasoning with the deepest engines of emotional processing, creating a neurological highway that has no equivalent in human anatomy. Furthermore, their insular cortex, the seat of self-awareness, empathy, and social consciousness, is developed to a degree of terrifying perfection. What does this mean for the reality of their existence? It means that the orca does not experience life as an isolated individual. Its neurological wiring makes the concept of a solitary identity completely foreign to its mind. Where a human tracks the world to the narrow lens of the I, the orca reads the universe through the vast, unified frequency of the we. Their emotions are not internal secrets locked within a solitary chest. They are shared, resonant forces that ripple through the entire pod instantly, creating an unbreakable, hyper-connected emotional network that binds 10 separate bodies into a single, multi-brained entity. They do not merely care for their family, they are their family. This is the terrifying perfection of the group mind, a biological supercomputer distributed across a network of living flesh. When a pod of orcas hunts along the coast of Japan, they do not need commands, they do not need blueprints, and they do not need to pause to calculate their options. The expansion of their paralimbic and insular systems allows them to achieve a state of cognitive and emotional synchronization that humanity can only replicate through advanced technology. They read each other's movements with microscopic precision, adjusting their velocity, their breathing, and their intent through a shared telepathy of sound and empathy. If one member of the pod feels fear, the entire network prepares for battle. If the matriarch visualizes a strategy, the family executes it with the flawless coordination of a single hand gripping a blade. This collective intelligence completely rewrites the rules of the blue arena, rendering individual strength entirely obsolete. A great white shark may possess 400 million years of perfected solitary weaponry, but its mind is a lonely fortress, incapable of learning from its peers or adapting past its hard-coded DNA. A sperm whale may possess the titanic endurance to conquer the crushing gravity of the midnight zone, but its strategy is anchored to the isolation of its immense mass. The orca looks at both and realizes that the ultimate weapon is not a sharper tooth or a larger frame. It is a shared thought. The hive of intellects transforms the act of survival from a desperate, chaotic scramble into a high-stakes, generational art of war. As the black and white silhouettes glide through the emerald currents of the Oyashio convergence, they move with a chilling, calculated elegance that can only belong to an empire of the mind. They are the supreme rulers of the ocean because they cracked the ultimate secret of the planet, that true power does not lie in what your body can destroy on its own, but in what your mind can construct in unison with your kind. The individual gods of the sea are about to discover that their kingdoms are no longer their own. The collective has arrived. The network is armed. The mind of the ocean is taking control of the machine. The ultimate weapon of the empire is not born in the blood. It is preserved in the memory, To look upon a pod of orcas hunting off the rocky coast of Hokkaido is to witness a phenomenon that science once believed belonged exclusively to the human race. A living, breathing, non-human. Culture. In the open ocean, biology gives you a body, and instinct gives you a drive. But culture gives you an identity. It is a shared inheritance of knowledge, a complex library of behavioral codes, hunting strategies, and linguistic dialects that cannot be hard-coded into a strand of DNA. While the shark must reinvent the art of the kill with every single generation, running on the same rigid loop of ancient instinct for eons, the orca builds an empire upon the accumulated wisdom of its ancestors. And at the absolute center of this empire stands a single, revered figure, the grandmother. In the vast ledger of terrestrial and marine life, the phenomenon of menopause is an extraordinary biological anomaly. Almost every animal on planet Earth is designed to reproduce until its final breath. Its evolutionary value tied strictly to its ability to pump new genetic material into the ecosystem. Only a tiny handful of species, including humans and orcas, break this law, allowing their females to live for decades after their ability to bear children has completely ceased. For a long time, evolutionary biology looked at this as a paradox. Why would nature fuel a machine that can no longer pass on its genes? The answer is found in the supreme value of an elder's mind. The postmenopausal matriarch is the living archive of the pod, a walking map of a shifting ocean who has lived for 80, perhaps 90 years. She is a monument of pure experience, her skin faded, her towering fin slightly nicked by the passage of nearly a century of currents. She has lived through the devastating El Niño events of the past. She has survived decades of shifting climate cycles. And she has memorized every reef, every canyon, and every seasonal migration route across thousands of miles of the trackless blue. When the modern ocean changes, when the fish schools vanish and the traditional hunting grounds turn into sterile deserts, the pod does not panic. They look to her. She carries the past. And in a world facing an uncertain future, the past is the only compass that matters. When the matriarch turns her fluke, the pod follows. She remembers the past. Her positioning at the front of the family is not a symbolic gesture of respect. It is a matter of immediate, operational survival. As she glides through the freezing waters of the Oyashio Current, her massive, experienced brain is continuously calculating the variables of the sea. She knows exactly which bays hold the fat, rich salmon during a drought. She remembers the precise phase of the moon required to trap schools of herring against the shallow cliffs of the mainland. And she understands how to read the deep, acoustic vibrations of migrating whales from miles away. Behind her swim her daughters, her grandchildren, and her massive adult sons. Giants that weigh 10 tons but remain entirely dependent on the mental maps carried by their mother. But her legacy is not merely a tool for navigation. It is a masterclass in education. The matriarch is a teacher. Along the wave-swept shores, she orchestrates the training of the youth, guiding the young calves through the complex, dangerous mechanics of the hunt. She will purposefully stun a salmon and release it, allowing her grandchildren to practice the angle of the chase. She will simulate the dangerous maneuvers of stranding on a gravel beach, showing them exactly how to catch a sea lion without getting trapped by the receding tide. This is the deliberate, active transmission of knowledge from one generation to the next, a continuous chain of learning that transforms raw biological infants into highly sophisticated, tactical soldiers. If the matriarch dies, the library burns. A pod that loses its grandmother loses its history, fracturing its ability to survive a crisis because they no longer possess the generational code required to read a changing sea. This cultural legacy is woven together by the most sophisticated vocal system in the marine world. The matriarch does not merely lead, she dictates the very voice of the nation. Every independent family of orcas off the coast of Japan speaks a completely unique vocal dialect, a complex language of whistles, clicks, and resonant calls that has been curated and refined by the matriarchal lineage over hundreds of years. This dialect is a cultural badge of honor, a precise linguistic signature that distinguishes one clan from another. Two pods can swim within the same square mile of the Kuroshio convergence, sharing the same water and hunting the same fish, yet be completely behaviorally distinct, speaking languages that are as different from one another as English is from Japanese. They use this shared voice to communicate across miles of open water, to synchronize their movements during high-stakes military maneuvers, and to reinforce the deep emotional empathy that holds the group mind together. It is a sovereign oral history written in the medium of sound, an acoustic thread that loops from the grandmother to the newborn calf, ensuring that the identity of the empire survives long after the matriarch's physical form has dissolved back into the salt. The orca does not conquer through the brute force of an individual life. It conquers through the immortality of its culture. The shadow of the ancient grandmother moves steadily forward, her dark, weathered form cutting a clean line through the churning emerald foam. Behind her, the family glides in perfect, rhythmic synchronization, their breathing aligned, their intent unified, their voices singing the song she taught them. They do not fear the vast, lawless wilderness of the blue colosseum, because they carry a century of victory in the mind of their leader. The library is open, the maps are armed. The legacy is moving into the kill zone, and the art of war is about to begin. The open ocean does not forgive a tactical error, for violence without strategy is merely an expensive waste of energy. To watch a pod of orcas execute a hunt off the freezing, ice-choked borders of Hokkaido is to understand that you are no longer observing the raw, chaotic mechanics of a wild animal. You are observing a military operation. In the high-stakes theater of the blue colosseum, prey species do not simply surrender to teeth. They possess their own evolutionary body armor, their own desperate bursts of velocity, and their own defensive fortresses. To break these defenses requires more than raw horsepower or a heavier jaw. It requires fluid mechanics, absolute chronological precision, and an unyielding commitment to the geometry of the trap. The orca does not gamble with luck. It treats the act of killing as a clinical, multi-layered science. These are not the automated reflexes of instinct. These are the learned, curated arts of war. Consider the problem of the ice flow. A Weddell seal, fat with energy-dense blubber, hauls its body onto a floating platform of solid pack ice drifting down from the Sea of Okhotsk. On top of the ice, the seal is entirely safe from the underwater world. It sits 5 feet above the surface, protected by a frozen barrier that no shark can breach and no solitary whale can shatter. A primitive predator would circle the ice until it starved, a prisoner of its own inability to cross the threshold of the air. The orca pod looks at the ice flow and identifies a mathematical flaw in its stability. The matriarch sounds the acoustic alert. The family forms a front line. 3 10-ton adult orcas align their massive black and white bodies shoulder to shoulder, floating completely still, 100 feet away from the target. They synchronize their breathing. Huff, huff, huff. The blowholes close in perfect unison. They submerge. The launch is a masterpiece of fluid dynamics. They do not charge with a chaotic thrashing of tails. They swim with a precise, low-frequency cadence, accelerating in absolute lockstep just beneath the surface. They are moving as a solid 30-ton hydrodynamic piston, driving a massive column of displaced water directly ahead of their snouts. 50 feet, 30 feet, 10 feet. At the final, calculated millisecond before impact. As they reach the edge of the ice flow, the three giants execute a synchronized, sharp, downward dive, flexing their massive flukes upward with a catastrophic burst of kinetic energy. The displaced water column has nowhere to go but up. A colossal, hydrodynamically perfect wave erupts from the sea, surging over the frozen platform with the force of an industrial flash flood. The wave slams into the ice floe, tilting the massive frozen block at a devastating angle and washing the frantic, clawing seal clean off its sanctuary into the boiling foam below. But the strategy does not end with the displacement. As the seal tumbles into the sea, a fourth orca, waiting in the ambush zone on the opposite side of the ice, opens its jaws to catch the falling prize. The frozen fortress did not fail because of a natural thaw. It was dismantled by an equation of weight, velocity, and timing. This terrifying computational brilliance becomes even more magnificent when the pod targets the open water, where the prey does not number a single seal, but a million fast, agile fish. Off the eastern shelf of Japan, a massive school of herring moves like a single metallic ghost, a silver wall of life that can twist, turn, and scatter in 1,000 different directions in a fraction of a second. To chase a single herring is an exercise in starvation. To conquer the school, the orcas must dismantle the collective defense of the fish using a tactical doctrine known as bait-balling. The operation requires an absolute division of labor, a multi-front deployment where every member of the family holds a specific strategic position. First comes the containment phase. The younger, more agile orcas dive deep beneath the silver school, flashing the stark, brilliant white patches of their bellies upward like underwater signal flare. The herring, terrified by the sudden flashes of light from the dark void, panic rising toward the surface. Simultaneously, the older orcas begin to encircle the school, swimming in a continuous, tight perimeter, blowing a dense, rising curtain of microscopic bubbles from their blowholes. This bubble wall acts as an acoustic and visual cage. The herring look at the wall of shifting foam and perceive it as a solid, impenetrable barrier, packing themselves tighter and tighter into a frantic, suffocating sphere of solid flesh. The bait ball. Once the silver school is locked within the geographic coordinates of the trap, the execution begins. The orcas do not charge blindly into the sphere to bite, for a direct strike would shatter the density of the ball and allow the fish to scatter into the blue. Instead, they take turns deploying their true kinetic weapon. An adult male orca positions himself on the outer edge of the bait ball, curls his massive torso into a high-tension crescent moon, and whips his 6-foot-wide tail fluke through the water column with a violent, snapping velocity. Thwack! The sound of the tail's slap cuts through the sea like an underwater explosion. The immense shock wave of displaced water and sonic pressure instantly paralyzes the nervous systems of every fish within its blast radius. Hundreds of herring are knocked completely unconscious, their swim bladders stunned, their silver bodies floating limply out of the packed sphere like autumn leaves falling from a tree. The orca moves in with delicate precision, picking off the immobilized fish one by one, consuming the energy with the calm, methodical ease of a diner at a banquet. Then, he slides back into the defensive perimeter, replacing a sister or an aunt, keeping the bubble wall intact while the next member of the family moves in to strike. The multi-million-bodied school of fish is transformed into a passive, static pantry, systematically harvested by a mind that turned the fluid properties of water into a vice. The final silver scale drifts downward into the green dark, and the boiling frenzy of the convergence falls instantly cold. The bait ball is gone, digested into the collective network of the pod, leaving the water completely empty. There are no remnants of chaos, no lingering panic, and no wasted energy. The family surfaces in perfect, unhurried formation, their massive dorsal fins slicing the glassy water together as they draw a deep, synchronized breath of air. They do not look like animals that have just fought for their lives. They look like engineers who have just completed a shift at a machine. The operational arena is quiet once more. The learned arts of war have been executed with zero friction, proving that when intellect unifies a pack, the entire ocean becomes a calculated map of opportunity. But the strategists of the sea are not finished with their campaign. As the matriarch adjusts her course, turning away from the silver schools, she points her pod toward a far more dangerous target. A target that carries 400 million years of ancient terror in its teeth. The ultimate test of the mind is waiting in the shallows. The lines of the final campaign are drawing close. For 400 million years, the throne of the middle depths required no crown. It required only a silhouette. When the shadow of the great white shark glides through the kelp forests off the coast of Japan, the ocean holds its breath. Survival in this realm has always been a math problem solved by razor-sharp geometry, individual cold-blooded speed, and a legacy of terror that outlived the dinosaurs. The shark does not look for equals. It does not understand rivals. It swims with the absolute certainty of an apex predator, engineered by an unblinking evolutionary crucible. But 400 million years of solitary perfection are about to collide with something far younger and far more terrifying: collective intelligence. From the gray mists of the open ocean, 3 towering black dorsal fins pierce the surface. A family of orcas is on the move. They do not swim with the frantic hunger of a fish. They move with the heavy, deliberate cadence of an army executing a long-planned campaign. Through a web of high-frequency whistles and acoustic clicks, they have already mapped the area. They have located the king. In the lawless blue, a predator hunting alone is a god. A predator hunting in a family is an empire. The great white senses the vibration through its lateral line long before the shadows materialize. Its electroreceptors, usually tuned to the faint, salt-sweet heartbeat of a dying seal, are suddenly overwhelmed by the massive, churning wake of 3 10-ton mammals moving at 35 miles per hour. For the first time in its 70-year life, the ancient shark does not turn to attack. It flees. The pursuit is not a chaotic chase. It is an exercise in fluid mechanics and tactical containment. The orcas do not rush in to trade bites with a jaw that can crush steel. They swim in an unbreakable flank formation, cutting off the shark's escape routes to the deep trenches. They use their collective mass to herd the 2-ton fish upward, driving it toward the surface, pinning it against the invisible ceiling of the air. Then, the execution begins. The matriarch of the pod surges forward, her massive black and white frame moving with an agile fury that defies her size. She does not aim for the throat. She rams her blunt, solid snout directly into the shark's flank with the force of an industrial piston. The impact shatters the water column. The great white stalls, its momentum broken, its prehistoric senses reeling from the blunt force trauma. Before the shark can recover, a second orca clamps its jaws onto the predator's pectoral fin. With a coordinated, twisting surge of its fluke, the whale flips the great white completely onto its back. The ocean falls dead silent. In that single, upside-down moment, 400 million years of evolution are instantly short-circuited. The shark's brain is flooded with a massive neurological overload, a biological vulnerability known as tonic immobility. The unblinking black eyes roll back. The powerful tail stops thrashing. The jaw, capable of severing a whale's tail, slacks open in a state of absolute chemical paralysis. The king is awake, but he is locked inside a prison of his own nervous system. He cannot breathe. He cannot fight. He can only sink. The orcas do not celebrate. They operate with the chilling, detached efficiency of surgeons. Using their teeth with microscopic precision, they make a single, clean incision across the shark's chest. They do not consume the rough, cartilaginous meat. They want only one thing: the liver, a massive organ rich in lipids and dense energy, the ultimate prize of the apex mind. With a final surgical pull, the liver is extracted. The rest of the pristine 2-ton carcass is left untouched. Slowly, the pale, shadowless body of the great white shark drifts downward into the dark, barren sands of the sea floor, destined to feed the crabs and worms of the abyss. The throne is empty. The myth of the solitary monster is dead. As the pod of orcas rises in unison to take a deep, synchronized breath of air, the message of the blue arena is made absolute. Individual power yields to collective intelligence. Armor fails where cooperation thrives. In the grand ledger of the ocean, the crown does not belong to the sharpest tooth. It belongs to the mind that hunts in numbers. The blue colosseum does not celebrate the triumph of a single master, for the ultimate architecture of the sea is built on the foundation of a grand, intricate balance. Off the eastern shelf of Japan, where the Kuroshio and Oyashio currents continue their eternal, churning dance, the boundaries of 3 distinct empires begin to overlap. Within this single, hyper-productive arena, the 3 wills of survival have brought their gods to the same geographic crossroads. They do not gather out of malice, nor do they wage war out of a desire for total eradication. In the grand ledger of the deep, enmity is a human invention. The shark, the whale, and the orca are not rivals tearing apart a broken kingdom. They are the 3 living pillars holding up the structural integrity of the open ocean, each executing a sacred, hard-coded duty within a magnificent, energetic blueprint. Every layer of this water has a master, and every master has a purpose. High in the sunlit columns and middle depths, the great white shark glides as the unblinking sentinel of the shallows. Her solitary blade culls the weak, polishes the schools of silver fish, and maintains the fierce vitality of the mid-tier consumers. She is the anchor of natural selection, ensuring that only the swiftest and the most adaptable carry the genetic future of the sea. 2 miles beneath her belly, in the crushing, lightless trenches of the abyss, the sperm whale reigns as the sovereign of the void. His titanic dives fracture the stillness of the midnight zone. And as he returns to the surface to breathe, his massive body fertilizes the upper sunlit pastures with nutrients dragged from the underworld. He unifies the surface with the trenches, driving the grand vertical pump that keeps the entire oceanic engine alive. And slicing through both realms with terrifying grace comes the pod of orcas, the supreme monitors of the apex. Their collective intellect stands as the ultimate checkpoint of power, balancing the densities of the great mammalian clans and ensuring that no single titan can grow so numerous that it consumes the foundation of the web. They are the weapon, the endurance, and the mind. This is the perfect, terrifying equilibrium of the natural world, when the 3 shadows cross paths in the dark waters of the convergence. The ocean achieves its highest state of evolutionary harmony. The supreme weapon, the desolate conqueror, and the collective empire do not compete for the throne. They are the throne. Together, they form a self-regulating machine of flesh, sound, and teeth that has successfully governed the deep for eons, converting the raw energy of the planet's currents into a perpetual cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It is a masterpiece of cosmic engineering, an unbreakable domino chain where every link is held in place by the lethal perfection of the others. The gods have met at the crossroads. The blueprint is complete. But as the 3 empires float within the same restless tide, a new artificial current is beginning to bleed into the arena. a distortion that does not care about the ancient balance of the gods. The ancient blueprint of the gods did not account for the arrival of the machine. For hundreds of millions of years, the blue arena operated on a currency of natural sound and chemical whispers. The shark read the clean, untainted voltage of the tide. The orca sang a generational dialect through crystal-clear currents, and the sperm whale relied on the pristine silence of the abyss to map the geometry of the deep trenches. The ocean was vast, heavy, but it was acoustically transparent. It was a world where a whisper could travel for 100 miles, and an echo was an absolute truth. But that ancient transparency has been violently shattered. A new phantom has materialized in the water, an industrial ghost that does not carry teeth, does not hunt for food, and does not respect the laws of the matrix. Humanity. We do not enter the ocean as participants. We enter it as an industrial pollution engine. The modern sea is no longer a silent sanctuary. It is a deafening, chaotic cacophony of human noise. The massive, churning steel propellers of thousands of commercial container ships slice through the water column 24 hours a day, creating a low-frequency grinding roar that fills every layer of the sea. Worse still are the commercial sonar systems and seismic air guns used for oil exploration, blasting through the water with violent acoustic pulses that can reach up to 250 decibels. This is not sound. This is kinetic assault. And for the Lord of the Abyss, this acoustic violence is a death sentence. Consider the fate of a 45-ton sperm whale diving into the Japan Trench. He relies entirely on his 236-decibel spermaceti cannon to see the dark, using the subtle returning echoes to construct his three-dimensional reality. When a commercial ship passes overhead, or a naval sonar tests its strength, the acoustic shockwaves scream through the midnight zone like a blinding industrial flashbang. The whale's delicate acoustic jaw is overwhelmed. His radar is shattered, and his internal map is wiped completely clean. He is turned instantaneously, violently blind. The sound hits his massive brain like a physical blade, fracturing his orientation and inducing a state of acute neurological panic. He can no longer find the contours of the trench. He can no longer track the giant squid, and he can no longer communicate with his clan. Driven to a state of absolute madness by a relentless, invisible screaming that he cannot escape, the Titan loses his footing in the abyss. He panics, ascending too fast, damaging his tissues, and miscalculating the gradient of the sea floor until he crashes head-on into the shallow sands of the coast, left to suffocate under the crushing weight of his own bones on a public beach. The loudest voice on planet Earth is systematically deafened, blinded, and broken by the casual, indifferent noise of our commerce. But the industrial invasion does not stop with the destruction of sound. It bleeds into the very chemistry of life. While the noise blocks the ears of the whale, an invisible chemical poison is quietly infiltrating the bodies of the shark and the orca. Every day, millions of tons of industrial runoff, agricultural pesticides, and microscopic plastic fragments pour from the dry land into the Kuroshio-Oyashio convergence. This waste does not dissolve. It enters the food chain at the absolute bottom. The phytoplankton absorb the toxins, the krill consume the algae, and the silver herring gorge themselves on the krill. With every single step up the trophic ladder, the poison concentrates, multiplying in density through a process known as bioaccumulation. By the time that energy reaches the apex hunters, the payload is lethal. Because the great white shark and the orca are exceptionally long-lived, top-tier predators, they act as ecological sponges for human garbage. The toxins, heavy metals, polychlorinated biphenyls, and chemical plasticizers are stored directly inside their massive fat reserves and lipid-dense blubber. The very energy reservoirs they rely on to survive the Arctic cold of Hokkaido become internal reservoirs of toxic waste. A mother orca, nursing her newborn calf with her thick, fat-rich milk, unwittingly passes a lifetime of accumulated human industrial poison directly into the fragile body of her child, sentencing the next generation of the empire to genetic mutations, reproductive failure, and a compromised immune system before it can even learn to hunt. We are not hunting them with harpoons. We are rewriting their internal chemistry, turning their own survival mechanisms into a slow, agonizing suicide loop. The three gods of the blue colosseum are completely helpless against this invisible siege. The shark cannot bite a sound wave. The whale cannot scream at a microplastic particle. And the orca's collective intelligence cannot strategize against a changing chemical matrix. The sovereignty of the mind, the weapon, and the endurance is being slowly suffocated by a species that stands safely on the shore, entirely blind to the destruction it leaves in its wake. The ancient throne is cracking. The water is turning toxic. The machine of the ocean is beginning to stutter, and the dominoes are starting to tip. The architecture of the Blue Colosseum is not a collection of independent kingdoms. It is a single, hyper-delicate house of cards where every god is a prisoner of the lowest tier. We have always treated the apex predators as isolated monuments of power, believing that because they sit at the summit of the food web, they are insulated from the fragile vulnerabilities of the world below. We look at the terrifying jaws of the shark, the titanic mass of the whale, and the brilliant mind of the orca, and we assume their supremacy is absolute. It is a fatal miscalculation of ecological physics. The summit does not support the mountain. The base does. When you alter the core temperature of the sea, you do not just shift the weather. You pull the foundational brick from the bottom of the structure, triggering a rapid, chaotic, and uncontrollable chain reaction that dismantles 400 million years of evolution in a matter of months. The dominoes do not fall slowly. They crash. It begins in the shallow, vibrant nurseries of the south, where the Kuroshio current carries a sudden, unnatural surge of atmospheric heat into the coral reefs of Okinawa. The equation is brutally simple. The water temperature rises by a mere 2 degrees Celsius, and the delicate, symbiotic alliance between the coral and its microscopic algae shatters. In a state of thermal panic, the corals expel their colorful partners, turning into a ghost-white cemetery of brittle stone. The dead coral means the immediate eviction of the entire reef metropolis. Within weeks, the crabs, the shrimp, and the millions of small saksa fish vanish, their habitat transformed into a sterile, decaying wasteland of crumbling calcium. As the lower tier collapses, the shockwave travels instantly up the vertical corridor of the sea. The silver schools of herring and mackerel, losing their northern plankton pastures to shifting current boundaries, fail to arrive at the Kuroshio-Oyashio convergence. The silver wall of life evaporates. This initial collapse triggers a devastating upward shockwave through the trophic pyramid. Without the dense schools of fish to fuel their migration, the northern fur seals starve on their rocky outposts, their populations plummeting into catastrophic decline. The dominoes crash higher. The great white shark, rising from the twilight zone, with her warm-blooded engine primed for a vertical execution, finds nothing but a silent, empty desert. Her electric snout twitches, scanning the water column for the biological voltage of a swimming mammal. But the matrix is dead. The shark does not directly hunt the missing silverfish, yet she is completely broken by their absence. Because the fish vanished, the fur seals disappeared, and with them, the shark's only accessible source of fat-rich, hyper-dense caloric energy is wiped out. Her internal temperature drops. Her massive red muscle blocks stiffen in the unforgiving cold. The 400-million-year-old killing machine is systematically neutralized, starved to absolute helplessness, not by a rival weapon, but by the hollow vacuum left at the bottom of the chain. And at the absolute peak of the empire, the tragedy reaches its logical, devastating conclusion. The pod of orcas arrives at the traditional hunting grounds, their synchronized fins slicing through a silent, sterile current. Their primary weapon is their collective mind, a staggering network of strategy, memory, and cultural heritage passed down through generations of matriarchs. They possess a tactical answer for every defense. They know how to create waves to lut-bang. They know how to build bubble walls to trap a bait ball. And they know how to paralyze a great white shark with surgical precision. But an advanced military strategy is completely useless when there is no enemy left to fight. Collective intelligence cannot create fish out of thin air. The grandmother's mental maps, curated over nearly a century of experience, become obsolete archives of a kingdom that no longer exists. The supercomputer of the pod runs its calculations, analyzes the empty currents, and finds no solution. The empire of the mind is defeated by starvation. The dominoes finish their fall in absolute obscurity. The chain shudders and breaks, proving that in the grand ledger of the ocean, the sharpest tooth and the most brilliant brain are completely subservient to the survival of the smallest organism. When the bottom tier dissolves, the crown falls instantly into the mud. The lords of the sea are left stranded at the summit of a dying pyramid, watching the blueprint of their existence collapse into a silent, unnatural void that no amount of evolution can repair. The lines are broken. The network is offline. The final silence is closing in. The story of the blue colosseum does not end beneath the waves, for the boundaries of the water cannot contain the consequences of the land. As the long, bloody streaks of twilight fade into a heavy, suffocating dark over the Northwest Pacific, the narrative begins its final, sweeping ascent. The perspective pulls away from the shifting current lines off Japan, leaving behind the immediate chaos of the hunt and the desperate architecture of the food web. It rises higher and higher into the cold night air, passing the towering kelp forests, the bleaching coral ruins of Okinawa, and the deep, silent fractures of the Japan Trench. The camera of the mind expands, looking at the planet as a unified whole. A lone, fragile blue marble suspended in the empty ink of space, where the vast, interconnected global ocean forms the very lungs, blood, and heartbeat of a living world. We have spent generations looking at this arena as an alien planet, a distant wilderness populated by independent monsters whose survival was entirely their own responsibility. We assumed the vastness of the sea was an infinite buffer, capable of absorbing any volume of our industrial noise, any payload of our chemical poison, and any degree of our atmospheric heat. We comforted ourselves with the myth of their absolute power. We believed that the 400-million-year-old skeleton of the shark, the deep-sea sonar cannon of the whale, and the brilliant collective brain of the orca were indestructible fortresses, capable of enduring any crisis. It was a comfortable, arrogant illusion. The lords of the sea are not gods. They are fragile masterpieces of biology, locked within a delicate web of life that we are systematically dismantling from the safety of the dry ground. Their evolution has run its course, and it has left them entirely defenseless against us. The future of the Great Blue Kingdom is no longer a question of natural selection, for the rules of Darwin have been overwritten by the accelerating pace of the Anthropocene. The shark cannot grow a thicker skin to repel the microplastics building up inside her tissues. The whale cannot re-engineer his acoustic jaw to drown out the shriek of our commerce. And the orca cannot strategize a political solution to a warming current. Their magnificent gifts, perfected over millions of years of clinical trial and error, are completely useless in an arena that is changing at an unnatural, industrial velocity. Their survival is no longer in their own hands. The clock is ticking, and the hands are being turned from the land. The Titans still swim, for now. But the ultimate answer does not lie in the speed of the shark, the cry of the whale, or the mind of the orca. It lies with the creature standing on the shore, holding the clock. We are the architects of the modern sea, the ultimate apex presence whose casual, daily choices dictate whether the blue colosseum remains a living theater of evolutionary genius or becomes a silent, toxic graveyard of stone. The choice belongs to the terrestrial ape. As the vast, curving horizon of the planet rolls into the shadow of the cosmic night, the shadows of the great hunters fade completely beneath the black swells, leaving behind a heavy, echoing question that only humanity has the power to answer. The arena is watching. The time is now.